Hey everyone, I'll wait just a few more seconds to let people join. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome. This is November the 9th, 2022, and this is the Delivery Group's monthly AMA. So, thank you all for joining. We have a question in the agenda, but I don't think Cash is here, so I'll verbalize. What are the main challenges you face daily? So, who would like to go ahead and share? I'm not sure half an hour is enough time, but give us a summary. Who would like to share some of the daily challenges of I guess, like working in Delivery Group or managing deployments and releases? Here we go. Oh, hang on, just pause yourself 1 second. Kesha's just joining. Hey, welcome, Kesha. We were just kicking off on your questions, so thanks so much for adding it. So, Delivery Group, who would like to go first? What are your main challenges?
I'm looking at Myra smiling, but she doesn't seem to be talking, so
She's
I'll take this
day.
one.
Go for it, Alessio. Tell us your day.
Okay, so I would say that there is a main challenge that is a recurring one, which is that as part of the Delivery Group, you are doing some shift as release manager. So basically, you can think of what you want to achieve during a year, and you have your quarters, your OKRs and everything, but then it's a full month where you are doing release management, where basically everything else stops. So this is really hard on personal level as well as on a team level. Then if we go on what we do as delivery outside of being release manager, one of the main challenges, I think, in our case is communication, because we are kind of at the end of the process. But when we want to change something, when we want to implement something new, we have to either implement it, but also convince everyone, starting from product development, whatever, why we're doing something, what we're doing. And so this is another big challenge. And then finally, challenge as release manager. So when you are doing release management, I would say the big challenges are incidents, because these are the things that are blocking your day-to-day activities, because we say a deployment to GitLab takes hours, and basically we try to fit as much as we can into the 24-hour, but then getting outside of an incident, if it involves a package that it has to be rebuilt or fixed or something like this, can easily take 8+ hours. So yeah, these are, I think, the three main challenges, at least for me.
Nice, thanks for sharing that, Alessio. Yeah, I definitely would resonate with a lot of those. I think it's very interesting as a kind of release manager. You have sort of some days are incredibly quiet and it's just promoting to GitLab.com. We just have one manual step that we have on our process. So we just hit the button and hopefully it all just moves through slowly, and we're all good there. And then there are other days, like particularly around kind of security releases and the monthly release, where actually trying to coordinate all of the different tasks you're trying to accomplish. And if you have a failing pipeline, like it's incredibly time consuming. And certainly that's probably the bit that I find most challenging. You're kind of in this reactive mode and trying to coordinate all the pieces. So I think the challenge is really the sort of the volume of tasks and the significance of getting the ordering right, getting the communication right, and meeting any deadlines as we go through.
Right. I was also told, as a follow-up question, or maybe not quite actually, I was also told that when someone merges an MR with a feature flag and they did not enable it in staging, that piece of work is not going to, they won't be able to enable it in production?
Correct. Yes, I believe there is actually a check on the feature flag that checks that staging has already been fully enabled. Yes.
Right. I have another question. So at my previous company, we obviously had sandboxes and a pre-production environment. And so all these different environments where you could actually test out your code without actually deploying it, without actually merging it into master. And when I joined GitLab recently, I realized that we primarily do testing locally and then we merge it into master, and that basically goes through different stages where you QA in staging and then in canary and then in, and I was just wondering, like the decision that let's not have any like testing QA environments, rather push this all towards like after merging into master. I wonder what like how did that decision come to being, and are there any challenges around that? Because I guess people that are new join, they might merge something that wasn't quite ready, maybe, I don't know, but they didn't really have a sandbox to test it in, if you know what I mean. If that makes sense, I hope that makes sense.
Oh,
Yeah,
this is a fun one. Mara, please go first if you want to.
yeah, no, I think it is a great question, and I think there are different angles to it. So one angle is that GitLab receives a lot of commits daily and even hourly, so we need to be fast enough to try to keep the pace. And actually, a funny thing is that in the beginning, 3 or 4 years ago, we only performed 2 or 3 deployments to production because we actually were testing like commits in a different environment. But that was so slow. And by the time we promote to production, when everything was broken because we were not able to test it like in a real environment. So because of it, we decided to be more agile and try to have this auto deploys pipeline that actually promote everything in a very fast paced. And we do have some Q&A environments that is like staging canary. We have also staging ref, and each on the, we also have production canary. And in each of these environments, we have that respective Q&A that tries to test, smoke reliable tests. And also in the terms of when something is not ready and you want to ship it just to continue like to your development, we have another tools like feature flags in which you can merge something into master and it shouldn't impact because the change is guarded like under a feature flag.
Right. And even with merges into the primary GitLab project or other projects that make up this whole suite, there are actually pipelines and abilities to run all of these and build the commit, deploy it, run a full end-to-end test, even run some surrounding full application suite tests in some scenarios. They aren't always used, to be fair, but they are there. They're just not always enforced.
Are we talking about prior to merging to master or after merging to?
Yeah, prior to the merge request even being accepted, there is a suite of tests that have the ability to do a full build-up and deployment of your code and all the related code related to whatever your changes are. So if, for example, there's an API change in Gitly and we need to make that same API change in the way Rails makes use of it, you can actually deploy all of those components as a whole suite that will build everything, deploy it, and actually perform tests against it. So backend maintainers get to make a certain amount of call on exactly which tests get run, but those environments are actually fully automated.
I think those tests are also automatically triggered depending on the files that you modified on the GitLab repo. But yes, sometimes they are optional and you need to actually click like a job in the pipeline to trigger and to build a package.
Yeah, but I think that what you're getting at is that ideally we would have a pre-production environment that's very similar to what we have production. You say click a button, deploy your code, and just do your manual testing that way, right? We don't have that right now because it's difficult to set up a data set that size and and enable like 1,000 people to be able to work on that. So we have these proxy things where we have this staging canary deployment, we have these automated QA. It's not completely the same. I can see there being a case for having a much nicer environment that's actually mimicking production as closely as possible, but I don't think we're there yet. I don't think it's a conscious decision. It's just that there's a lot of little things we can do before we need to do that. But it's something we should probably consider.
We are actually working on something that is, say, partially related to this, because we are extending the standard backport policies from only the current milestone to 3 version back. And so we actually have the problem of not having a long-running environment for all the 3 stable versions. And so we are working on a way to have those environments set up and running in a kind of, say, in a way of continuous delivery, the stable branches, instead of just installing the packages. And as we are going through this, we are actually thinking about, can we build on top of this short-lived environment that could be tied to a given merge request so that you can create and run prior to merging something? And yeah, so this is all discussion that are happening. There are a problem with dataset. There is a problem with the number of merge requests, because if you take a look at the number of merge requests that we have in GitLab, the project, if everyone is going to spin up a Kubernetes cluster or just a namespace inside a cluster and run pods, there's going to be also a huge cost issues. So there are many things connected to this.
Thank you. Thanks for answering.
Nice. Thanks for asking. Great question. Does anybody else have a question they would like to verbalize? I would just mention as a sort of final note then, so up at the top, just above the agenda, I've added a couple, 3 links to the kind of 3 big things that delivery group is working on this quarter. So the first one, maintenance policy extension, is what Alessio just mentioned. So hopefully we'll be able to open up the maintenance policy a little bit within the next quarter or 2 and be sort of regularly accepting bug fixes to go back a couple more versions. We've just started working on our deployment pipeline observability work. So at the moment, we actually don't have brilliant sort of data or trending around our deployment pipelines. So we can't really easily see if we have a long running pipeline, like whether we commonly have long running pipelines or whether a certain job has trended up or does it fail in sort of certain patterns. So this is going to be the sort of first piece of us actually starting to build that out so we can make better decisions about how to improve the pipelines. And then our final piece is we're working to make the Kubernetes clusters easy to rebuild. So this is sort of a good bit of maintenance that we've sort of fits on top of our Kubernetes migration work that we've been doing to actually allow us to hopefully make the clusters a bit more flexible, and hopefully that unlocks some sort of other deployment approaches in the future for us as well. Awesome. Kesha, do you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, so I had another question. Like, what happens when like a maintainer merges an MR and it's actually breaking staging, but because I'm asleep, I don't know that it was merged, etc. And it wasn't under a feature flag, let's say. And so yeah, what happens in that situation?
Yeah, this is a great question. So what would happen in this case is it would most likely, hopefully, be caught on our staging canary. So the first environment where we run QA tests on the package. then we would end up with failing, most likely we'd end up with failing tests. And I should say, actually, the very, very first step is, with a bit of luck, it would have failed to merge, right? Hopefully it would have failed tests on the merge pipeline and wouldn't have actually merged it. But in the event it did, it would most likely have been caught on our staging canary environment. The test would have failed, so the deployment would have rolled out the package, test would fail. At that point, we would ask the quality on call engineer, who's one of the software engineers in test, they have a rotation. They would have done an investigation to sort of figure out which test is failing and what's the cause of that. Most often, they would identify the MR quite quickly. And if you weren't online, we would use the development, the dev escalation process, a development DRI would revert the change to unblock the pipeline. So that's the sort of the most usual one. There are times where the failure can be a bit obscure and maybe we can't necessarily identify the exact MR causing it, in which case a bit more investigation. Again, dev escalation is our process that we use to engage people from within development if we don't know who specifically or which specific stage group to go to, until we investigate and find the actual cause, and then we revert that out. So we have processes to catch this. They are fairly involved. They do generally require sort of like 3, 4, maybe more people to be involved in this. And they also take a while. One of the things which I think Alessio mentioned earlier was one of the actual pain points we have on our process is reverting is a really slow process, because a revert MR is basically the same as an MR. So an MR has to be created, it has to get merged, and we have to build a new package, and we have to deploy that. So actually the turnaround time of a broken staging canary and a recovered staging canary is quite a lot of hours, which is why certainly in delivery, we're huge fans of feature flags. So if you're putting in something that might be risky, a feature flag is a really, really great way, because what that does is it puts the control back in your timeline, because we can just get the code changed to be deployed to the environment, but it's completely up to you when you turn that on. So you can do that in your day. You can see the tests running. If there are any problems, you can turn that off. So it's certainly a much shorter recovery sort of loop for us.
There's also something to be said here, that is, we have rollback as an option, which is lowering the time it takes to recover the environment, but is not lowering the time it takes to get out of, let's say, the incident. Because in order for us to restart the deployment process, the regular one, we still need to have that thing revert or fixed, usually revert, and then merged, packaged, and everything. So the total amount of hours is still the same. It's just that we may restore the functionality of the environment earlier if we have the opportunity to roll back.
And how often does this kind of situation happen?
More often than we would like to admit, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably it's probably maybe once a week, I would guess. Like on the whole, I think our merge, our sort of approvals, our maintenance, our reviewers, our merge pipeline tests actually do a great job. And a lot of feature flags are in use as well. So I think an awful lot of these sorts of things are avoided. But we probably, I would say on average, around 1 a week. The real pain point for these things is the impact it has on other teams. The most significant time is in the sort of several, say, 3, 4, between 2 and 4 days before the monthly release. Because what it can end up with is, if we don't do a deployment for 7 or 8 hours, actually quite a lot of changes don't make the monthly release because of a hard deadline. So the impact can be quite wide, but we do only see a reasonably small number. But I do think, like with our process, our kind of reviews and all the tests that go on in the merge pipelines, like, I think an awful lot of stuff is caught very early on. So it's not we shouldn't be in fear of this happening. But a feature flag is a great way if we have got something that's slightly risky.
there's also the impact of the things that is broken that has to be considered, right? Because if you're talking about major feature broken with no workaround, this is exactly what we described, right? So we're gonna stop everything and find what to revert, and nothing will continue. But if we're talking about minor feature that is not behaving correctly, but there are workarounds, or is not really used that often, because maybe there's something that is not even under a QA reliable test, so we can't notice this until it's in production. And at that point, you say, okay, what's the impact of this? And we can say we can keep it buggy and just fix it. And in the next 6 to 12 hours, this will be rolled through all the environments. And so we get fixed. So not always rolling back is an option. We're talking about priority 1 and 2 issues mostly.
And when something goes into production, I might have read or heard somewhere that people actually like manually enable the deployment to next stage. Is that what happens?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
There is a baking time of 1 hour in before that. So when we have the package running on the canary stages for 1 hour, release managers receive a pings. They have a ping, and there are information about the health of the system that get taken at that point in time. And so it's just, you click the button.
And why is that not automated, but rather done manually?
The release manager are not wearing a pager. So there is no expectation for us to be actually online when this happened. And so this is one of the main reasons we have been working on automating this couple of quarters ago, but we were starting from far away from that point that we actually implemented rollbacks and all the tests, but we never went through the phase where we just going automating the rollout, because we have no availability list of release managers and knowing if someone is online or not.
Sorry.
I was going to just add to that. So like when a deployment is rolling out to the production environment, if there are any problems or like questions or things, it's the release managers who would join the incident to help the engineer on call. So we have a kind of responsibility for when changes are rolling to production. We guarantee that there's a release manager available at that time. So just to keep those two things in sync, we have still the manual promotion.
And is not just to be around at that point in time, but is kind of for the next 2 hours, even more, because the rollout takes time. So this is the commitment the release manager are saying, I'm here, I'm online, I can pay attention for the next 2 hours, say.
Right. And we have release managers like everywhere in the world, I'm assuming, like in every time zone. So they're like 24 hours a day.
That's right. Yep.
Excellent.
Great. We're getting close to time. Does anyone have a final question they would like to verbalize today?
I got something, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So this most recent line of questioning reminds me of the fact that we still have to be available. A delivery team member must be available when an auto-deployed package is going out. So I guess the challenge here is, what could we do to remove ourselves from having to be online and make it such that it's fully automated without us needing to be around to kind of babysit the situation? Like, what can we do to enable, I don't know, infrastructure or maybe some other team to just be like, oh, well, here's a problem, let's just hit this button and roll back?
Well, I think even beyond that, I would say, Skarbek, like actually, rather than sort of passing the responsibility to another team, I think having the automated rollback is actually the solution, right? So increased health checks on our environments and rollback if certain flags are hit. And then that way, even if it paused at the next stage, then we're not sort of relying on any human to have to be the one to watch it. The risk, of course, of that is you really have to get those flags to be accurate, because otherwise you have a lot of rollbacks, which also take time when you didn't need to. I think that's probably the biggest challenge to actually enabling something like that.
I think another challenge should be our ability to halt a deployment when it is going, like when a certain metric has been reached. Right now, there is a point in time in which we cannot simply just cancel a deployment in the middle of it. And for us to be removed from being like release manager watchers, we will need something like that to halt a deployment and then to start automatically a rollback.
Yeah, agreed. Great, thanks for asking that, Skarbek. So Kasia, we're going to make your question the final question of the day. Thanks so much for having them, bringing them along today. Do you want to verbalize it?
Sure. So would you say, we talked about a lot about like feature flags and that being an option for everybody. Would you say that by default, people should just throw feature flags at majority of their work just to make sure that it's easy to just disable it when it needs to be? It's easy to kind of test it and make sure that everything works out.
I will say that for sensitive changes, yes, when you are involved in projects, CI builds, or something that might affect a lot of users, it is easier and safer to roll it out under a feature flag and then just ship it gradually. And actually, feature flags are very cheap. Like development-wise, you just need to add a couple of lines and then it is guarded, and then to remove it, it is also easy. For trivial changes, I would say that it is not necessary.
Do we have any official sort of guidance from like the backend maintainers? Like, is there do we have any documentation about when to use a feature flag and when not to?
I believe we do. It is documented somewhere. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, we'll see if we can find that for you, Kasia, because I think it's a little bit nuanced, but I think generally they're cheap, but we do need to remove them. So there's a little bit more overhead there.
Yeah, I did read something in our docs about that. It is quite high level, I guess. It just says if you have a sensitive change, then put a feature flag on it, that kind of thing. So it's not exactly saying like what area or like what level of like how many changes or anything like that. It's more like basically that the engineer needs to decide what they think and then just go by that.
Yeah, and I'd say that's very much going to be down to impact, as Alessio was mentioning earlier. We wouldn't always roll back a change. So if it's a low impact problem, you know, it's something we would fix forward. So in that case, it probably wouldn't be expected a feature flag would exist. Fantastic. Okay, we are at time. So thank you so much. Thank you, Kasia, for having so many questions, and for everyone else who joined in the discussion. Like, really great to chat to you all today, and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll hopefully see you next month.
Thanks a lot, team.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Yeah.